Well, I'm in Philadelphia right now, a city associated with cheesesteaks, liberty, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, Betsy Ross, the Liberty Bell, and of course the Phillies. But why did the Phillies stay here and not the A's, who were the more successful team? Let's talk about it in this episode of Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast where we talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade. I've completed 5 full seasons here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. As you can see from the background, I'm clearly no longer in Philadelphia. I am currently in Oakland, and so are the Athletics. And the fact that the Athletics are not in Philadelphia, where the Phillies are thriving, but they're here having a nomadic existence, taking them from Philadelphia to Kansas City, to Oakland, and in all probability to Las Vegas very soon, while the Phillies have stayed in Philadelphia, is part of the purpose of this video that you're going to see today. Essentially, why did this happen? Why are they here? And why are they about to move again? Why isn't this an institution of Philadelphia? And why didn't the Phillies be the team that moved all over creation? Well, in order to understand that, we have to start looking at the Phillies and where they started playing way back in the 1880s. The Phillies used to play here at this lot you see behind me. Not at that crab restaurant. This was a stadium. It was called the Baker Bowl. The Phillies played here from 1887, you heard that year right, 1887 to 1938. In 1887, it was considered a state-of-the-art stadium. Phillies played there under many different names. Sometimes they were called the Phillies. For a little bit, they were called the Blue Jays. At one point, they were called the Quakers, which was appropriate because the team didn't put up much of a fight. Hall of Famers like Grover Cleveland Alexander and Chuck Klein called this place their home. The 1915 Phillies played the World Series here. And Babe Ruth actually played his final game on this spot. The Philadelphia Eagles also used to play here at one point. But it was, well, let's just say, eventually overshadowed by stadiums built after 1890. They had a right field wall that was really, really close and made for some cheap home runs, making some people think Chuck Klein's home run total that got him into the Hall of Fame is somewhat tainted. And you know we can't have people with tainted home run records in the Hall of Fame. But eventually, the Phillies saw that their antiquated stadium wasn't going to work anymore. And eventually, it was torn down. Now, for years, there was absolutely no markers or no acknowledgement that the Phillies played here. I'm right now at the corner of 15th Street and Lehigh. It's in between Broad Street and 15th and Huntington. Now, to the city of Philadelphia's credit, in July of 2022, they put up a plaque commemorating the site that this was the Baker Bowl. It's for rent. If you're a diehard Phillies fan, you could own a piece of Phillies history. But the Phillies up and moved. This is where the Phillies moved to. Now, if you see right now, it's the home of the Deliverance Evangelistic Church. It's on the corner of 21st and Lehigh here in Philadelphia. It's less than half a mile away from where the Baker Bowl stood, and it takes about 15 minutes to walk there. I know, I just did. This was a stadium that was occupied, and the Phillies paid rent to play in what was called Shibe Park. This was the home of the Athletics, or the A's. Whether you call them the Athletics or the A's, there was a name that you could not take away from them, and that was Connie Mack. Connie Mack was the original manager of the A's when the American League was formed in 1901, and he stayed there for decades, delivering trips to the World Series for the A's in the 1900s, the 1910s, the 1920s, and the 1930s. They won 5 World Series titles along the way in Philadelphia. Meanwhile, in the first 80 some odd years of the World Series, the Phillies won 1 game. Not 1 series, 1 game. The A's were clearly the team of Philadelphia. They won the titles, they spread their titles over several decades, and they had legendary Hall of Famers, going from Rube Waddell and Frank Home Run Baker, all the way to Mickey Cochran, Jimmy Fox, Lefty Grove, and Al Simmons. This is where they played, right here. And the A's were the team. And yet, the A's no longer play in Philadelphia, despite the fact that they were the big team, the big draw, with the legends and the history, and the Phillies were a forgotten franchise. So why was it that the A's were the team to abandon Philadelphia? Eventually, Shibe Park was rechristened to Connie Mack Stadium. When the A's played here, one of their stars was a pitcher named Bobby Shantz, and he said that the front area of Connie Mack Stadium where fans entered, which is right around where I'm pointing to right here, looked like a church. And you see the old pictures of it, it did have this kind of spire look to it. Perhaps it's appropriate that there's a church there on the spot where the stadium was. But when you think about it, the main difference between the beautiful Connie Mack Stadium, which has been forgotten save for a plaque on Broad Street, and the beloved Wrigley Field or Fenway Park, was the fact that those 2 stadiums survived. If Connie Mack Stadium had been refurbished or rebuilt the way that the redoing of Fenway Park and Wrigley Field kept them from the Wrecker's Ball, perhaps this spot here would be one of those revered, hallowed places in Major League Baseball. A great stadium that harkened back to glory years of the past, like Wrigley and Fenway Park does. It would have been a sacred place. I guess it kind of still is. And the Phillies played in Connie Mack Stadium until the 1970s. And a great irony that the stadium that was named after the patriarch of the A's was occupied by the team that took over Philadelphia in their place. To understand that, you have to understand a little bit of stubbornness, a little bit of, well, corruption, and some interesting timing for the Phillies and the A's.
Our new sponsor is Backblaze. What is Backblaze? It's an online storage cloud that provides a foundation for businesses, developers, IT professionals, and individuals to build applications, host content, manage media, backup and archive data, and more. With over 3 billion gigabytes of data storage under management, Backblaze currently works with over 500,000 customers in over 175 countries. If this sounds good to you, you can get unlimited cloud backup for your Mac or PC for just $99 a year. If you have a business, it works on multiple workstations and offers 1-year file retention and version history. Even better, Backblaze has restored over 55 billion files for customers, and you can get your hard drive restored by mail and shipped to your door. To receive a fully featured, no-risk trial, go to backblaze.com/lockedonmlb. It'll give you plenty of time to upload and download some files. Seriously, back up your stuff. Again, go to backblaze.com/lockedonmlb and sign up for the free trial and see why the New York Times Magazine and Tom's Guide have all recommended Backblaze. And here's a quick reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. and it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app.
Connie Mack wound up managing the A's for 50 years, and they won the World Series in 1929, 1930, and they went to the World Series in 31. And there was a little bit of a rallying cry. Let's win one more pennant for Connie Mack. But in 1938, Connie Mack had blood clot issues, and people were worried he was about to die. Plus, he was 76 years old. And people in the 30s who were 76 years old tended to be close to death. And Connie Mack was pretty much expected to retire, which he did. 12 years later, that win one more pennant for Connie Mack rallying cry, you know what? He should have given up after 3.5 decades and championships in several decades, going to the World Series in 4 different decades. You would think that would be enough. But a sense of stubbornness drove the team into the ground. And the A's demise also had to do with family strife. Now, Connie Mack was kept in power of the team even though he was sick, old, and having trouble remembering the players' names. And they kept finishing in last place year in and year out. But he was kept in power. Why? Because his sons, Roy, Earl, and Connie Mack Jr. were feuding over who was going to have control of the team when dear old dad left. The sons tried to buy each other's shares out and win the approval of their dad. And you know what? It didn't quite work. And all the while, Pop was sitting in the dugout and the team kept losing 100 games year in and year out. But they were still the A's. They were still Philadelphia's team. But then the hapless Phillies were put up for sale, and a man named Gottlieb tried to buy the team. Now, because Gottlieb was Jewish, it was clear that no one was going to approve the sale to him. So instead, they sold to a guy named Cox, who was a degenerate gambler, but the correct religion. Now, Cox only ran the Phillies for 1 year. He was suspended because of his gambling. But in that 1 year, he changed the course of Philadelphia sports and the A's forever. He decided to spend money on minor league talent and developing players. A novel idea, but a lot of teams weren't putting in that effort to try to put together a good squad. Now, he started laying down the foundation for a solid farm system. When he was kicked out for his gambling, the Carpenter family bought the team, and all of a sudden they inherited a club in the mid-1940s that had a lot of really good young players in their system. And it came to fruition in 1950. The Phillies blossomed and they went to the World Series for the first time since 1915. That year, 1950, the Connie Mack's A's lost 102 games, and 92-year-old Connie Mack finally retired. The Phillies had, for the first time ever, passed the A's as the team of Philadelphia. And for the Phillies, the timing couldn't be better. In the 1950s, cities saw populations in post-war America shifting, and few markets could support 2 teams. St. Louis saw the Browns leave, Boston watched the Braves skip town. One team had to leave Philadelphia in the 1950s, and it wasn't going to be the popular Whiz Kids fresh off a trip to the World Series. The Whiz Kids were the Phillies, by the way. A movement to keep the A's in Philadelphia fell on its face, and the team ultimately went to Kansas City. And that left Phillies with the city. The A's have never had a sense of stability. In Kansas City, they were rumored to be moving all the time. In fact, there was an announced move that they were going to go to Louisville. They wound up going to Oakland in the 1960s. And they've actually been in Oakland longer than they were in Philadelphia. But they've always been talking about moving, and they've never been satisfied with the Coliseum. And They may be going to Las Vegas. They may be going to somewhere else in Oakland. They may go to Portland, Nashville. I don't know. They're probably going to move somewhere. And they should have been a Philadelphia institution associated with the city, like the Tigers in Detroit or the Cardinals in St. Louis, instead of being vagabonds. But instead, this city belongs to the Phillies. The Phillies have the beautiful stadium.
Hey, let's hear a little bit from our friends at FanDuel. This is basketball season, and you better check out FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the National Basketball Association. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and now is available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.
This should be the A's stadium.
Heading fifth, number
The A's should be playing here,
Castellanos.
but it's for the Phillies now.
Heading sixth, number 25, designated hitter.
Things could have been
Garrett
slightly
Hall.
different. Now, I will say this. I give the city of Philadelphia some credit and the Phillies that at Citizens Bank Ballpark, they have a statue to Connie Mack. They honor him because he is one of the great titans of baseball here in Philadelphia. If you're talking about nostalgia, and you talk about the great history of baseball in Philadelphia, before the 1970s, in baseball, it was dominated by this man. Unfortunately, maybe his stubbornness led to this ballpark belonging to the Phillies and not the Athletics. The statue of Connie Mack here at Citizens Bank Ballpark also lists the names of the A's Hall of Famers from Philadelphia. So while the A's did not stay here and build up their legacy as long as the Phillies did, at least they do have a spot here. And that brings us back here to Oakland. This is where the A's have been since 1968. The Phillies got that beautiful stadium and the A's got this. And they don't want this. And so they want something else. They could have had Citizens Bank Ballpark if only some of Philadelphia history unfolded just a little differently. So Philadelphia is a Phillies town, not an A's town. All because of some simple factors of greed, stubbornness, and really bad timing. Well, the A's are going to find their home eventually. It should have been right here. So go to Locked On MLB Pods on both Twitter and on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Looking at the legacy of the A's, the Phillies, and why the worst team, at least in terms of history, claimed this city. This is Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. I'm going to jump up and down like Rocky, and you can call me Sully.